Good morning. My name is Tom Edmonds. I'm the Executive Director of the Southampton Historical Museum. I want to thank Penny Wright, the Director of Programs at the Rogers Memorial Library, for co-sponsoring this lecture. The topic of my lecture today is The Charmed Life of James Cresson Parrish. The narrative was written by Mary Cummings. Mary is our research center manager, and she wrote the narrative and I supplied the photographs. Some disparate subjects touched on in this presentation will be the 1939 World's Fair, our founding fathers, the Vanderbilt family, a Broadway showgirl, a lot of ice skating, and I mean a lot of ice skating, and the Bee Gees. Most people here know a few things about Samuel Longstreth Parrish, that he once owned this house and added the music room where you are now sitting. To say that Sam is prominent in the civic and political life of Southampton from the time that he first arrived in the 1880s is an understatement. He loves Southampton and becomes one of the village's biggest benefactors. During the Gilded Age, as a wave of philanthropy sweeps the country, it is sometimes called the American Renaissance. It is a time when people of a certain class were expected to give something back in exchange for their privilege, and Sam Parrish leads the way. He supports paving roads in the village. He founds a library, a hospital, an art school, and of course, he gives the village an art museum that still bears his name. Less familiar to people in Southampton is James Cresson Parrish, Samuel's older brother. He's more deeply cultivated, more worldly, and definitely richer. While Sam is described by a relative as shy, quiet, and poor, James is known as a bon vivant, a man who loved life and lived large. James is shrewd with his money, though hardly miserly. Like his brother Sam, he loves Southampton, where, over time, he acquires several impressive houses and probably funds the building of this house on First Neck Lane, which was built for his mother, and it still stands today. As the same relative once remarked, Sam has the ideas and James has the money. James Cresson Parrish was born into a family of Philadelphia Quakers in 1840. It seems unlikely that James, with a Quaker heritage, would acquire such worldly tastes and diverse interests, but the same characteristics are found in his previous generations. Thanks to Brother Samuel's illustrated autobiography titled Early Reminiscences, we know that his great-grandmother, Sarah Redwood Fisher, and her husband, Mears Fisher, are members of Philadelphia's high society in very good standing. Mears and Sarah Fisher are known as unusually lavish hosts, which is hardly typical of Quakers. This is a watercolor of Urry House, built in 1795 by Mears Fisher. During a stirring period in colonial history, various dignitaries enjoyed the young Fishers' hospitality. Among them are Benjamin Franklin and two future presidents, General George Washington and John Adams. After an evening spent with the Fishers, John Adams writes in his diary, "We dined with Mr. Mears Fisher, a young Quaker and a lawyer. We saw his library, which is clever, but this plain friend with his plain though very pretty wife, with her these and thous, has provided us with the most costly entertainment." In 1811, the Fishers' daughter, Sarah, married Samuel Longstreet, a well-to-do Quaker and wholesale dry goods merchant. In 1814, Sarah Fisher Longstreet gives birth to a girl, also named Sarah, who is James Parrish's mother. The family lives in a Philadelphia townhouse next door to Samuel's brother, Joshua. Uncle Joshua is well remembered for generations. Sarah Redwood Longstreth is taught everything a gentlewoman would need to know. At the age of 7, she is sent to a well-known French boarding school kept by Madame Fredigo. Sarah was taught music and French. Madame Fredigo teaching methods were almost entirely oral. There are few books, and mental arithmetic is featured. Sarah's parents believed that the school would provide a better education than what the Quaker schools were offering. Her parents show an openness to the world which a Quaker education would have lacked. At this time, Sarah's grandfather, Mears Fisher, continues to surround himself with the nation's most prominent figures. In 1825, while Sarah was at Madame Fragoard's, there was an event that she never forgot. The Marquis de Lafayette came to America and visited her school. Everyone was presented to the distinguished visitor, and Sarah got to shake the Marquis's hand and exchange pleasantries in French. Tragedy strikes the family the following year as a wholesale merchant, Sam Longstreth, traveled on horseback, often in harsh conditions, to see his clients. In 1826, while in New Orleans, he dies of pneumonia at the age of 39. Longstreth, or Uncle Joshua, who lives next door to his brother Samuel's family, becomes the central figure of the Longstreth family for several generations. Ambitious in his youth, Joshua amasses a considerable fortune as a young man. He retires at the age of 60 from active business, though he keeps his hand in and is, for a long time, a director of the Philadelphia Bank. 18 months after Sarah's father dies, her mother perishes. Sarah and her 6 siblings are orphans. Sarah and several of the older children go to live with their Uncle Joshua, who at that time was still living next door. In 1830, after a year of travels abroad, Uncle Joshua returns to make a permanent home at his country place. Barclay Hall is a 10-acre estate in Philadelphia and is surrounded by open country. As you can see, I've filled in with some of the images that we don't have, but this is actually one. This is Barclay Hall. You can see some of the Parrish family members, or the Longstreet family, gathered about the front door. The children in the family always look forward to spending time at Barclay Hall, where Sunday dinners begin at 2 in the afternoon with as many as 20 family members. Uncle Joshua is a colorful character who reads few books but keeps up with the newspapers. So I just love this cover of Happy Days. It's a paper for young Americans, but I can imagine Uncle Joshua reading it. In 1835, Sarah Longstreet marries Dr. Isaac Parrish in the Friends Meeting House in Philadelphia. They live on the same fashionable street where Sarah was born. That is the Philadelphia Quaker Meeting House in the middle. James' father, Dr. Isaac Parrish, dies in 1852. Dr. Parrish's children became devoted to their widowed mother, Sarah. Her son, Samuel Parrish, waits until after Sarah's death before he marries for the first time at the age of 79. She must have been a formidable woman. James Cresson Parrish is 12 when his father dies. He is now the oldest son and more interested than Sam in making his way in the world. He watches over his siblings, especially brother Sam. James and Samuel spend their summers at their wealthy Uncle George's farm called Oxmead in New Jersey. Oxmead is a child's paradise where they develop an appreciation for country living that eventually draws them to spend their summers in Southampton. So in a way, I'm telling you how they get to Southampton and why they enjoy it so much. James Parrish leaves for college, but soon finds he is not ready to spend 4 years reading books. He'd rather be reading that crazy newspaper. He longs to be out seeing the world and making money. So in 1857, at the age of 17, James leaves college to join his Uncle George's business. So there's George Parrish's business building in Philadelphia. You can see his name over the door. By the 1860s, James Parrish travels as a partner in his Uncle George's wholesale business, negotiating with clients at home and abroad. He makes many connections with important European financial figures. Communication between James on the road and his Uncle George in Philadelphia is by telegraph. This telegraph from Uncle George to James Parrish prods him to sell clothing imported from Europe, and is very difficult. Jackets are $3.50, pantaloons are $2.75, male or female, I'm not sure which. Suits are $6. With the advent of the Civil War, supplying the military became very profitable. In 1872, James makes his home in Paris and takes advantage of his many European connections to become a major player in railroads, like a lot of wealthy Gilded Age players. He represents Dutch, French, and English businessmen who have invested in American railroads. He becomes fluent in French and a connoisseur of continental arts and culture. With his charm, fluent French, and joie de vivre, he is popular with highly placed figures, and he makes a lot of money. Among other investments, he is a financial backer of Thomas Edison. He remains proud of his fluency in French and his taste in art and music for the rest of his life. That is not James Parrish, but I found that on the internet, and I just found it so typical of the period, of men who, and women too, who went to Europe to get enlightened. That's a lot of paintings. You would have to sit down to look at them all. A rich man now, James begins to live the life of an astute investor and a philanthropist. He takes up golf and ice skating as favorite pastimes. James leaves the arduous work to others, but not the travel. So we think this is St. Moritz in Switzerland. And we're lucky enough to have some documentation on James's life. But if we have 20 photographs, 18 of them are of James ice skating. He loved ice skate, and he loved his photograph ice skating. Actually, when I come to think of it, there's no images of him taking photographs of the monuments or anything. It's always of James ice skating. In 1882, James Parrish abandons his married bachelor life and marries Emma S. Thorne. She's the granddaughter of Commodore Vanderbilt. They settle in New York City on East 78th Street. Emma's mother is Emily Elmira Vanderbilt Thorne. She is the fourth daughter of Cornelius Vanderbilt and a philanthropist. The Thornes have a townhouse on West 16th Street and build Stoneleigh, a summer home in Newport. And that's the only photograph I could find of Stoneleigh. It's unusual because most Gilded Age mansions in Newport have very nice photographs, but this one's still in private hands. Cornelius Vanderbilt dies in 1877 with a $100 million estate, which is $200 billion today.
Wow.
I'm sure Cuba has less money than that. That's an amazing amount of money. He leaves most of it to his sons, but his daughters do all right. Emily Amelia founds New York City's Sloan Hospital for Women with a $1 million endowment. The new Mrs. Parrish was previously married and brings 2 children to the family. Dr. and Mrs. James Parrish become popular members of New York society. In 1882, Emma gives birth to their daughter, Helen Parrish, who becomes Southampton's golden girl of the Gilded Age. Everyone loves Helen. As a young girl, she, like her father, loves a good time, whether playing with children of fashionable families at the Shinnecock Hills Summer School of Art in Southampton, and that's just the greatest photograph. That is Art Village, what it looked like at the end of the 19th century. So a lot of those houses are still existent today, except for,
Yeah,
except for
threatened.
the windmill there. She also enjoys the pleasures of city society and European travels. In 1900, Helen Parrish participates in the Women's Championship at Shinnecock Golf Club. The Shinnecock Golf Club has the first women's championship tournament in the United States. She doesn't do well, but there she is right in the middle, swinging a club. She is, I guess, like the Gibson girl. If you've ever seen images of the Gibson girl, it was a popular image in the early 20th century. Helen was her Uncle Sam Parrish's favorite niece, and the charming Art Village cottage, Honeysuckles, is his gift to her, and that is 2 Briar Lane, which is on Hill Street and Briar Lane, and you can't see it. That's something I found on the internet, but you can see on the right-hand side is a newer edition. It would have been smaller. The front porch actually defines the boundary. So that would have been the original Honeysuckles. 2 years later, in 1884, Helen's brother, James Cresson Parrish Jr. was born. He too is fond of a good time, but his playboy behavior does not always end well. And that's James and I'm not sure who, nice young lady in Switzerland or someplace. To the surprise of the family, young James Parrish chooses as his bride a showgirl. which he meets in Paris. Charlotte Catherine Palmer causes a family scandal when she is sued for chiseling two dressmakers out of nearly $20,000. I think the newspapers play this up, and it's probably not that the dressmakers got chiseled, but the $20,000 for clothing. James Jr. did inherit the family charm along with his father's fondness for golf. Father and son had many good times together. So there's an early photograph of tournament day at the Shinnecock Golf Club. During the 1880s, James and brother Sam become regular Southamptonites during the summer. As early members of the summer community, they appreciate the village's charm. And so if you look at the yellow building on the right, that's the Rogers Mansion when it used to face Main Street. Sam and James invest in real estate and encourage their friends to buy land and build cottages. So that's the road in front of us is Pond Lane, and so there we're looking at the east side of Lake Agawam with very few privet fences. But it looks like the beginning of privet fences. In 1889, they see to it that their mother, Sarah Redwood Parrish, would have a suitable place in Southampton. They arranged for Stanford White to design white fence, which survives on First Neck, which I've already mentioned. Here's an early photograph of the porch. Helen and James Jr. on the porch with white fence. And I've been in that house, and it is just amazing. And one clue, I always suspected that Stanford White designed parts of the Rogers Mansion that looked very similar. And when I walked into the house, I could just point. It goes, oh, that's in the Rogers Mansion. That's in the Rogers Mansion. So the Rogers Mansion, I think, is an undocumented, has undocumented designs by Stanford White. Eventually, James acquires multiple properties in Southampton, most prominently Heathermere in Shinnecock Hills and
Ziandu?
on the ocean, both destroyed by fire. So that magnificent house is gone. Heathermere, a castle-like colossus, is conveniently located next to the Shinnecock Golf Club for James to indulge his daily golf habit. Shinnecock tribe member Oscar Bunn is a world-class golfer, but his ethnicity keeps him from competing in professional championships. But Oscar did participate in championships in Europe, in South America, and in Central America. He was a well-traveled professional golfer, except in the United States, where he couldn't cross the color barrier. He's a popular caddy and golf club carver at the Shinnecock Golf Club. We have a hand-carved wooden golf club in our collection that Oscar Bunn did. He and James play a few rounds and become good friends. Oscar Bunn presented this case of Paleolithic tools to James Parrish in 1898 as a sign of their friendship. The case is on display in this room, and if you look underneath the slide projector, that's this case.
Oh.
So it's very unusual to have a remnant of a friendship between a white man and a Native American from over 100 years ago. James commissioned
Ziandu?
a sprawling college opposite the Meadow Club, which was later dubbed the Ark. That is the only photograph I have of this magnificent mansion. There's just none that I can find anywhere. It was purchased by the Bee Gees in the 1970s. There they are. In the 1970s for $300,000, sold to Woody Allen for $3 million in 1982, and then it burned down sometime afterward. Does anybody remember?
Yes.
New York?
Yeah.
Now pictures of that.
You do. Please share. Could C-Mac, do you know the designer? The architect? No? After James' wife Emma dies in 1887 at the age of 42, James, always a fond father, becomes even more devoted to his children. He keeps in close touch even when he is traveling, as evidenced by this telegram he sent to Helen on her 11th birthday. And it says, Papa wishes his dear daughter many happy returns of the day with love to all father. In 1892, William Merritt Chase comes to Southampton for a second season, leading the Shinnecock Hills Summer School of Art. During the summer, Chase paints a portrait of Sarah, James and Sam's mother, the family matriarch. The school, ongoing from 1891 to 1902, burnishes Southampton's cultural image, and after closing, leaves behind the charming art village where students live and work. This is one of my favorite photographs ever. It is posed and casual at the same time. The three women in the middle, I'm sure, decided to represent the three muses. William Merritt Chase is painting over on to the right of those three women, and that bicycle just dumped right behind him is too good to be true. It reminds me of an Edgar Degas. In 1895, 2 years after Chase painted her portrait, James' mother dies. Her most touching eulogy is found in Samuel's reminiscence. He writes, "To us was given the inestimable blessing of our mother's long life, an example of loving care which surrounded each one of us for the 43 years that she was spared to us after our father's death. At the age of 79, the still unmarried Sam is the world's oldest orphan." That was my narrative. That Mary didn't write that. By 1897, when his brother Sam retires from his city law practice, James begins spending most of his time in Southampton. James loosened his ties to the city. In 1898, he sold his townhouse on 26th Street and began using the Metropolitan Club as his base in New York. The Metropolitan Club is amazing if you've ever been. It's just stunning, and it is the only building in New York City with an entrance that accommodate a four-in-hand. So you can see the gates that open there. There's enough room to get a carriage and 4 horses to turn around in it. It's quite great. James begins acquiring dwellings where he could enjoy his favorite pastime: golf, skiing, ice skating, while always keeping a sharp eye on his investment. So you can see there's somebody or one person down there, looks like he's trying to get his way out of the gulch. I think that's called the gulch. There's a dip in the golf course there, and Heather Mears in the background. At his oceanfront residence in Southampton, I was almost going to try it, James is a generous host of lively dinners, musical evenings, and informal card games. He keeps a guest book signed by the fashionable Emmets, Boardmans, Peabodys, along with Zella de Milhouse of the Bohemian Artist set. One guest left a sketch of Thank you. Which means more or less, right?
On the dunes, something on the dunes. Anybody
Something-
say
Maybe Z, is it C? C-S-E-A? No, but does it mean C?
It's
It's Dutch, right? So
Z and Dune. Well, if you look at the artist down at the bottom says Z and Dune and then more or less, so maybe that's their interpretation of their drawing. So maybe that was the name of the house. James is always ready to fund his younger brother's ideas for village improvements and cultural enhancement, like his art museum, which opens in 1898. An appreciative Sam wrote, "About the year 1900, my brother James became greatly interested in the museum, and by means of his generosity, the grounds were much enlarged, and the brick wing extending to the north of the old building was projected and completed in the summer of 1902 under the supervision of Grosvenor Atterbury." Now, nobody sees the side of this, the Parrish Art Museum, which is on the east side, overlooking a parking lot. So, CMAC Sammy came to me. He was restoring it. What was that, about 8 years ago? And we just happened to have an extra fountain in our collection here that wasn't doing anything. So CMAC steered the reinstallation of a fountain. That looks very similar to that, doesn't it? The bowl, the bowl.
The base is the same, the base is what is there. The bowl is...
We had the bowl, but I don't think we had the base, did we?
No, the base, we found the base.
You found the base, really? So that's nice. Early visitors to Samuel Parrish's Art Museum find its rooms well stocked with reproductions in marble, bronze, and plaster of Roman, Greek, and Renaissance sculptures. Objects he believed would have a valuable education influence on townspeople. Isn't that nice? We need an improvement. There is one remnant from that collection in this room. If you look over here on the right-hand side, you'll see a wooden case that has white plaster medallions. Sam Parrish went to Europe and had these bronze medallions cast. He didn't want to spend the money on real ones, but he thought if everyone in Southampton could look at these plaster casts of medallions, and there everybody can do it, There's also drawers underneath where if you want to see more, you can see more. So we could all be improved by going over there after my lecture and getting enlightened. It's an odd curiosity. In 1902, James sailed from New York Harbor for a European tour with his son, James Jr., showing his son the cosmopolitan cities and lush countryside where he had spent so much time as a young traveler on business. Obviously a great pleasure for him. James Sr. takes careful notes and publishes his observation in a book that has been reprinted today. You can order this book by James Cresson Parrish online.
Wow.
And if you can read the subtitles, some account of the travels of myself and my son in the summer of 1902. James' daughter Helen joins her father and brother in Austria, and James' record of their meeting, this is a quote, "Mountain walks beneath the deep shade of the evergreens leading to the charming views, with here and there a rude seat for the weary." I guess that must be him. In 1903, an important family event brings much excitement to Ziandun. James, I got it, Mary,
Yeah,
you can relax. James Sr.'s daughter Helen marries the architect Archibald Manning Brown. Architect Brown has an impressive career that includes designing the Bathing Corporation, also called the Southampton Bathing Corporation actually, which is known locally as the Beach Club in Southampton. He also does a lot of houses here in Southampton. One is Four Fountains, which is, I can't remember where that is, but that's a significant mansion there. He also does the Heinz Dome at the 1939 World's Fair. At this dome, you could sample 57 different flavors of ketchup. In a later photo, Archibald and Helen are hand in hand with their children at the Parrish Art Museum. So this is a pond, a reflecting pool that used to be on the west side. And that's Sam Parrish, we think, right at the apex, that corner of the reflecting pond. James was very fond of his grandchildren born to Helen Archibald and visited the Brown family often at their home, East Farm in Stony Brook. Built in the 18th century, East Farm was remodeled by Archibald in the farmhouse style. And that's a contemporary photograph, so that the house is still standing. In the new century, life for James is more or less free to indulge his almost limitless capacity for enjoying the good life and good things in life. And I think they're skiing there. That's one of the few photographs where he's not ice skating, right? James is popular with Southampton Summer Colony. He has children and grandchildren whom he loves and join him at golf. They are almost as avid as he is. And again, that's another look at the Shinnecock Golf Club. James has a cottage in Lakewood, New Jersey. That's not his cottage. Another resort for the rich, which has unrivaled skating and a golf course where, except for the extreme weather, golf is possible all winter. That is the Lakewood Country Club. He also has a cottage in Garden City where he perfects his skating, sometimes with a partner. So this is sort of a casual photograph that is in our collection, but somebody typed the title of that, and James' initials are at the bottom, so it may have been him, cataloging his ice skating. And when he is in St. Moritz, he brings his skates. Another favorite skating venue, Old Town Pond in Southampton. He can't skate, but gosh, he's going to get out there anyway. And this is another great photograph because on the right all the coats are thrown over a tree, which really makes this really good photo. James keeps his sunny disposition and enthusiasm for life until the day he died. The diary he kept in 1916 when he was 76 records the pleasures of a charmed life spent with jaunts to New York, enjoying theater, concerts, and always golf and skating. This is the interior of the New York Opera House. On February 21, he fit it all in the morning skating with the children and Archie, that's Archibald Brown, to New York by the 3:52 train, took Miss Lamini to Rigoletto, and then dining at Sherry's restaurant afterwards. That's quite a day. That's too much for me. On March 25, James and his son Jim were in Lakewood at the Lakewood Country Club for golf. To Lakewood, Jim came on a later train, had 18 holes of golf, beat me, giving me 2 strokes. Jim dined out. I had a pleasant evening. Monday, April 24, another perfect day before closing the Lakewood house and heading for Southampton. James fits in some golf. James writes, beautiful bright morning, thermometer 47 degrees at 7 a.m. Golf with Admirals Perry, Hubbard, and Sam. 47 degrees at 7 a.m. On June 7, James has a rare bit of unpleasantness. He writes, had a strange attack, fell off my chair at the Waldorf at the breakfast table, carried to a dingy little room, slept for 16 hours. He was attended by Dr. Niles, Jim, and Jim Lee, his nephew, looked after him. So that's the rooftop restaurant that used to be at the Waldorf Hotel. You can see the gigantic skylight at the top. When the Southampton social season is in full swing in July, most of his diary entries begin with dined with. On July 23, a diagram of the table set for Mrs. Van Ingen's summer colony favorites, the Stewarts, Humphreys, Thompsons, DeWitts, and French. In our collection, we actually have a dining diagram and a place setting for, what, is it 12 people here in this house by Sam Parrish?
Right,
And I think it's in honor of a visiting bishop.
Cardinal.
A cardinal. On November 7th, in 1916, James records that he and Sam wait for election returns together and go to bed, convinced that the presidential candidate, Charles Evans Hughes, has beaten Woodrow Wilson. Mary and I have been trying to figure out how they watched the election returns. There was electricity here.
Was there
Not watch, it
radio?
says wait.
Well, we don't know if it was watch or listen or
Right.
how, so it's to be determined. I'll send you email updates. Hughes, who was waiting the good news at his Bridgehampton house, is as surprised as James and Sam to learn of the upset that put Woodrow Wilson in the White House instead of him. I'm sure that photo was taken before. On November 1st, the stock market is in decline, but James declares his financial affairs in good shape. In good spirits, he breakfasts at Delmontico, New York City's most fashionable restaurant, and dines with his son, Jim, at Cherry's, and takes in some theater. James, in his diary, says, and you're wondering what this photograph is, he wrote, 2 Delmonticos for breakfast, sold a lot of stocks to reduce my indebtedness. Jim and I dined at Cherry's and went to 7 Chances, an amusing play, Sam being part of the party. 7 Chances became a really popular movie for Buster Keaton, who you can see in the middle, in 1925. It was a blockbuster. So that's where I got the image. For another decade, James continues to enjoy life at a round of dinners, family gatherings, cultural entertainments, golf and skating. In July of 1926, he dies peacefully in his sleep. Isn't that a great car?
Yeah.
It's a 1910 Phaeton.
How old was he when he died? What year was he
Well,
born?
you're
1887.
jumping ahead of me.
Oh.
His obituary in the Southampton Press says, golf in summer, skating in winter were his diversions, and as an indication of his vigor up to the very end of his life, it is interesting to note that he played 9 holes of golf at Garden City Golf Club the day before his death, and on the very evening preceding his peaceful passing away, had left the club after dinner to hear a little music, one of his chief pleasures throughout his life. And that's the end of my talk.
Oh. No, why do you walk with tight crossing?
Any questions?
Oh, I have a comment. I looked up Z and it does mean C-S-E-A in Dutch.
So by the sea.
Well, Tappan Zee Bridge, it makes sense, Z.
In one slide it said Dr. Sam Parrish, but I thought you said he jumped out of college and started making money instead.
There are so many Sams and so many Sarahs.
Okay.
It's really hard to remember. Mary can.
But it was Dr. Isaac Parrish.
Dr. Isaac Parrish was their father.
Okay.
But there was Sam Longstreets. There's, it's just the same names were passed down. So
If he went to law school, it'd be doctor of law.
what's that?
If he went to law school, it'd be doctor of law.
It could be. Right.
So I think the Parish Art Museum has portraits of some of these various people.
Right. We do. We have a bust on loan over here. That's Sam Parrish. bronze bust. It's on one from the.
They once had a whole family there.
Yeah,
Yes.
Where is Oxmead? Is that in the Lakewood area?
Oxmead.
Oxmead was,
Outside Philadelphia.
I think it is Pennsylvania.
You said New Jersey.
Oh, New Jersey,
It's in
that's
New
right, it was
Jersey.
in New Jersey.
Right, have you heard of it?
No, but I'm a New Jersey native, so I'm curious. I'll have to look into it.
I wonder if it was near Lakewood. You know where Lakewood is?
I
So,
thought
Oh,
that they seem to have a connection to that area.
But Oxmead might have been just the name of the estate.
who died first, Sam or James?
Sam died in the 30s.
Sam died in the 30s?
1933, so his
32, yeah.
older brother died first.
Okay.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much. Thanks for.
Thank you.